life I live here tells me I have no rights.
They are invisible to the majority of the population here.
Nobody recognizes us. Whether you're a male or you're a female, nobody cares.
So many farm workers get injured here, go to Jamaica, die in Jamaica. And what? No compensation, nothing.
These are not isolated incidents.
I just want to weep for this man who's just trying to support his family.
It's not what you'd expect from a place like this. There are dark stories spilling out of wine country. They're talking about workers that are falling through the cracks of our healthcare system. And we're asking, who's responsible?
My name is Jane Andres, and I live in the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. And for the past almost 20 years, I've been running a bed and breakfast. I think we chose this line of work because my husband and I are both people-oriented, and we enjoy storytelling, we enjoy cooking, we enjoy having people over.
Every fruit Jane serves comes from local farms. And in 2005, she met some of the men who work those farms.
We'd been here about 8 years when I got asked to help out with the music at a little church service for Caribbean workers. I was told there's a fellow called Winston in my neighborhood who was musical. So I set out with my dog on a walk, figuring, well, this will take about 15 minutes because there's only a handful of guys. I had seen the men around before in the neighborhood, but I just thought it was the same 2 or 3 guys that were riding their bikes by. I would just kind of wave without really making eye contact or looking at them. And 10 minutes later, somebody else would go by on the bike, and I never really paid attention. I was so surprised to find over 100 men living in my neighborhood within a 10-minute walk of the house that in 8 years I did not know were there.
The Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program has now been going on for 50 years. The program was created in 1966, and it's essentially continued virtually unchanged all these decades later.
For the past 10 years, Dr. Janet McLaughlin has been researching the health concerns of migrant workers that come to Canada.
When we go to the grocery store, we often see pictures of farmers, and we think about the local food system, and we feel good to support local food. But what we don't see are the invisible images of the farm workers who supply that system. I've never gone to a grocery store and seen a big poster of Caribbean men, Mexican women, Thai and Indonesian women working in packing plants, being promoted as our vision of local food. These workers are like a conveyor belt. Healthy young workers are brought to Canada. They are worked very, very hard on the farms. And when they feel like an injury is starting to occur, they often don't report it, and then it becomes permanent. When that happens, that conveyor belt ships them back home, and it replaces them with a whole new set of healthy young workers.
Some of the workers we met have been coming to Canada for more than a decade. Yet every worker we spoke to was scared to speak out. They only did so when we agreed to conceal their identities.
The one who really knows right and decide, no, I'm tired, I'm gonna take a rest, then he's out. He don't wanna work next year. And this is, I'm telling you something from what I've been seeing over the years. One morning, we went out, and it was -13. A couple of guys was crying, like, no, it's too cold, we need to go home. Right after we go home, then the boss come. So the boss come around and ask, so you guys, what time you guys going home back? Then one serious guy says, oh, it's too cold, it's -13, and we're not going back out because it's afternoon, so we're not going out, we call it a day. The boss didn't say that he's not pleased, but actions speak louder than word. The next year, then 4 guys didn't make it back for the job. Those are the guys who speak up and say it was too cold, so they decide to quit.
Some migrant workers support up to 8 people back in Jamaica. For many of them, these jobs provide their children with a future.
Sometimes I have fruits to pick. Sometimes I have grass to weed, stuff to clean. But 90% of the time I do pack fruits. I want for my girls to have a different life from what I have. I don't have a college degree because education back home is very, very expensive, and you have to be well qualified to get a good job. So when I heard about the program, I didn't know if I could manage, but that was the last thing on my mind.
We've heard a lot of reports of seasonal workers coming here, getting injured, and being sent back, and they're struggling. Their families are struggling because of it. I mean, are these stories that are commonplace?
I know somebody, and I think it was a machine that cut his fingers, and he was sent home. And I saw him before I came back up, and I said to him, "What's going on?" And he said, I doesn't hear anything from anybody. If anything happened to us, it's like, oh, you recycle plastic. You know, we go home and they forget about us because there is more down there waiting to come.
Wherever you find workers, you will find groups like this one. Ontario law prevents migrant farm workers from joining unions, so alliances are filling the gaps.
We provide assistance with WSIB cases when workers get injured. Most of the workers that come to our center are Mexicans, but we do work with Caribbean workers. Español, y ahora es para que yo haga el trámite. There's really nobody that is in between the employer and the worker. It's only the liaison office, the consulate, and normally they tend to favor the employer.
Stories on migrant workers often paint employers as the villain, but the farmers we talk to say they appreciate their workers. Lino Mori is a well-known farmer in Niagara. He's set to retire after operating one of the largest and most influential nurseries in the region.
It's been an exceptionally good thing for us to have those people being able to be here. And we've had some of those for 25, 30 years. The Jamaicans are tremendous workers. They'll take a shovel and work, heavy work, hard work, they're terrific. Without them, I'm going to tell you that there'd be very few farms operating. And the problem with picking, you've got to pick them not tomorrow, they're right today, you got to pick them today, right? Getting all that labor is virtually impossible to do here, no question about it. And for us as a nursery, it was the same thing.
This isn't a good guy, bad guy situation. As you will see, the story is much more complex than that. And what I'm trying to wrap my head around is that this is happening in Canada.
They need to be unionized. They need to have a union that speaks for them.
I don't actually see this at all as an issue between employers and employees.
Well, that's a big question. Who is ultimately responsible?
It's a matter of government policy and the WSIB as to how they operate and how they do these things.
It's an international disease to complain about your government.
My girls will never, ever come on this program.
The Jamaican Liaison Service, who's supposed to be our representative, tell us if you don't want to work or if you refuse work, we have 100 guys in Jamaica to replace one guy's spot.
Shouldn't Canada be doing something to care for these workers?
Hardest part for me is when I wake up in the hospital and see that I could move. That was the hardest part for me. Because I've never been like that before. I was never sick in my life.
With everything that you've gone through, do you think you're lucky?
I don't believe in luck, I'm blessed.
There are two types of injuries. So say someone was working and a blade fell down on them and their hand got chopped off. Well, that's pretty obviously work-related. Those workers were more typically able to access compensation because they went to the emergency room. Emergency doctor would typically fill the application form and then they would receive some compensation. The chronic issues, things like cancer, kidney failure, chronic pain, it's a lot more difficult to prove those types of issues are related to work. Either way, even if they had received some compensation for their initial injury, they still weren't receiving enough compensation to support their families for the loss of income that they sustained after this injury.
When people are injured, they follow the letter of the law, and employers can sleep at night saying, nope, this is part of the program I signed up for. This is a program he signed up for. Everything is being done correctly according to how the program was designed.
Well, again, it becomes a matter of work of the, WSIB, the workman's compensation, because we pay for that. And I'm going to say possibly the Jamaican liaison officers and their people.
Migrant workers come to Ontario, and while they're here as workers in Ontario, they're covered under the Ontario Workplace Safety and Insurance Act.
We do find that a lot of the workers don't know, most of the workers probably don't know what is the process when you get injured. A lot of them, because of fear of repatriation, they don't say anything.
The majority of workers who are here under the program that get injured actually stay here and get back to work. So, I'll give you an example. In the first half of 2016, this year, we've had approximately 74, 75 cases, ballpark. Up until the end of June, none of those workers who were injured were sent back to their home country.
We have to understand, for a lot of people who don't know what the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program is, it's a bilateral agreement between Canada and the participating countries. And so it's all done through immigration, and it's all done through the consulate or the liaison office of the workers' country of origin. So the workers come in a contract with one specific employer. They are tied to one employer, so they can only work for that employer while they're here. So workers are afraid that if I speak, they say, okay, so you're going back to your country.
I think one of the critical pieces of this equation for us is how good is that relationship with those liaison offices to ensure that there's a representative for those workers. Those workers come because they want to come and earn a living for a short period of time and do well and work hard and take money back to their home country for them and their families. And a critical component of that success are those offices.
The Jamaican Liaison Office is based in North York, Toronto. They are fully responsible for migrant workers' interests, and they're under the authority of the Jamaican government. We have learned that Canada has no jurisdiction over this office. What Jamaican workers have to say about their representatives is troubling.
Another guy was here. How bad this guy was, he had to go to rehab. The first week, The liaison service came to tell this guy that he has to go home by the weekend. This guy has to learn how to walk, learn how to talk, and you're going to take this guy to send him home to Jamaica just like this? The doctor said, this guy is my patient. Until I'll let you know. Right now, he's still in Canada.
We tracked down the man this story is about.
I was in a coma, they say, for 21 days and 21 nights. So when I wake up, I find tube here, tube here, tube here, all about. All my arms, all about. And I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk, I couldn't move my hands, I couldn't move my legs. I have to stretch out in the bed, keep my head like this and my hand like this. I have some needles right here, the trach was right here, so I couldn't do anything. And it's one of my lungs collapsed. I just feel a pain, so I thought it was my heart. So I went to the doctor, they gave me some tablet, but the tablet that they gave me wasn't for that. And then 3 days after, the pain still bothering me. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, I went to the hospital, and then I don't remember anything. My mother was a Christian, so I grew up in the church. So by the grace of God, I know that I'm blessed. The machine that I was on in the hospital, it was only 2 in Canada, 1 in Vancouver and 1 in Toronto. They have to call 21 doctors for lungs, liver, kidney, heart, everything. They did have 2 persons on the machine before me, and the 2 persons died. 3 go after me and they died. So I didn't lucky, I'm blessed. As I said, I'm here for a reason, not for a season. Then Jacob answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do anything.
Do you think God spared your life then?
Yeah. Everything you have to put God first. He created you, teach you how to love. He blessed you. He spared your life to see another day.
Someone tried to send you home?
It was this liaison officer, a lady. She come the Wednesday and she said they bought my ticket already. And I should go on the Friday. The doctor said, no, you can't go home. You can't even walk. You couldn't even remember anything. My name, nothing. I have all memory loss. It was the doctor saved me, and the therapist, and the nurses.
So tell me what your rehab has been like, I mean, after the immediate care of the accident.
I remember the first time when I wake up, and first I'm a therapist come and they're gonna teach me to walk. I couldn't stand up because I weigh 67 pounds. After I do 7 months, I still have to go back to rehab for 3 months. 3 months, maybe 3 months, 2 weeks.
Okay, so about a year of like constant care.
Yeah, I have to go like 3 times a week.
Why not go back to Jamaica? Why not get the health care there?
No, you won't get that here. You have to have money to get that in Jamaica. If this sickness happened in Jamaica, I would be rotten a long time ago. That's it for me. I would die. First, I would blame our liaison officer because the other one that should stand up for us. And if they are not, it's hard for someone else to step in and support you.
The Workers' Safety and Insurance Board, or WSIB, works with all of the liaison offices. Together, they are supposed to ensure that migrant workers receive appropriate care.
You know, I can't speak to specifics, although my sense is some of them work better than others. So you mentioned Jamaica. I think over time we'll have some challenges with some of them versus others. Jamaica might be some at different times might be a bit more challenging from what I understand from our staff. But as I say, our job is to try and keep as close a relationship as possible, because the evidence shows for us, to the extent that that relationship works well, we have the best outcomes.
Or if it doesn't work well.
Or if it doesn't work well, then we maybe don't have as good of outcomes as we otherwise could.
It's important to know that every worker we spoke to had complaints against the Jamaican liaison office. And so we reached out to that office. We sent many emails over several weeks with no response. And so we put in call after call, and I finally got a hold of the chief liaison officer, and he said that he's not doing any media interviews because he's been burnt in the past. But we did get him to agree to answering some emails, and so we sent him a list of questions via email, but there's still been nothing in return. It's no wonder that workers are frustrated as they struggle to get answers as well. Ken Forth is the president of Farms. His organization works closely with the Jamaican liaison office.
Back in 1984, the Conservative government came out with a white paper on cost recovery. And one of the things they weren't going to do, they were not going to do the logistics for this program anymore. We went to a meeting with the minister and we said, you can't cancel this program, because in essence, that's what was going to happen. He said, we don't need to cancel it, you do it. So we set up Farms. By middle of '87, we had Farms set up. Service Canada still remains in control of the program completely, because they give approval each and every year to every employer on the program. We're bringing people into this country now from the first week of January, and the last ones leave the 15th of December, and people are coming and going every day and week in the year.
So if the workers say there is a problem here, I mean, who is responsible for that?
Jamaican Liaison Service, you got the Liaison Service from Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Trinidad, Tobago, and Barbados, and the Mexican Consulate. As soon as they have a worker that's been injured, they talk with the Workmen's Compensation Board, and they are their advocate there.
Should there be a Canadian representative for workers here in Canada?
No. No. We have more rules and regulations in this program than enough. Just wonder why everybody thinks a Canadian's smarter than a Jamaican. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Because their people, they know how their people are, how their people, the cultural difference, if there is one behind them. If they have a problem with the liaison service, the problem isn't with this country, it's with their country, and they should be talking to somebody back home in the Ministry of Labor and complaining about that system.
Canada has no responsibility in that?
They got lots of responsibility, but they got no responsibility into dealing with an issue that a worker has with his government.
So if you're hurt on a Canadian farm, who do you have that open conversation with?
I don't know. I'd like to have that scenario, and I'd like people to, when people accuse agriculture as a blanket statement of doing that, I'd like them to name the farm. And I can't get that to happen. So if I can't get that to happen, if they won't identify ABC farms in Backroads, Ontario, then it's Hollywood. It's been made up. If a worker's injured, he should get health care. He should. If the farmer's doing something wrong, he should be brought to be accountable. But what will happen is if one incident happens, then that's happening on every farm. And that's simply not true. Some of us really enjoy this job, and and I don't understand how we're all blamed for the same thing, because that's what we are.
In 2006, I had the idea of doing a concert, something official, to welcome them back when they came in spring. To say thank you to the men, to recognize that they're here, because they are invisible to the majority of the population here. They are invisible. People don't know they're here. So to give them a public, official recognition that they are here and contributing to our community. So, I mean, looking over the past 10 years, it has been successful on many different levels in that it has removed some of the stereotypes. There's been a lot of ripple effects that have been very encouraging, certainly like with healthcare and just general awareness. I think many people are much more inclined to say hello in the grocery store instead of look the other way, or Many people just will toot their horn and just to recognize them when they're riding their bike down the street, just not being so invisible. So I think there have been many, many positive spin-offs.
Yeah, Jane did pull me into this for sure. Our family was involved. We actually went to South Africa. We were working on a mission station there that was working with orphans and vulnerable children. And Jane would say how one doesn't need to go to the other side of the world, that there's people groups here. And for her, and now for us, that was the Jamaican workers. We're still involved with the work in South Africa, but what has happened as I've gotten to know some of the workers around, that has become a part of our landscape here. I very quickly saw that there was this whole community around us, around our home, that I wasn't so aware of. And so as soon as the faces become names, relationship has started, and it just goes from there. And as is my want, it becomes part of our family life here. The Jamaican workers became part of that.
We got very close to a couple of families, and we just thought, my gosh, it must just be so painful for them to leave their children back home. Like when they're gone for 8 months, that's a huge, huge chunk of their children's lives that they're missing. They miss the first steps, they miss the first days of school, they miss graduations, they miss birthdays.
And this is Kemar. And this is Kemar. And Kemar Dixon.
The men would say, we don't tell our children when we're leaving. All they do is just sometime in the middle of the night, they'll give their sleeping child a kiss goodbye on the forehead, and when the child wakes up in the morning, they're gone.
What's it like being away from your children?
Well, it's hard. It's tough. But as a dad, you have to do what you have to do. You have to stay focused. You have to be strong.
All right, who's this little angel?
This is my smallest.
Your youngest daughter was 4 months when you left last. She's now 4 years old.
Well, to be honest, I see her the less. I remember I only spent 4 months and 2 weeks with her. And we talk more than the rest of the kids. She's so nice. Every minute she want to talk to daddy. Somebody do her something, daddy, they call me hug. They say, I'm not your princess anymore. I said, no, who says that? So what else you have to tell daddy now? I love you too, little princess.
Let's talk about Jane. She's a special lady to you. What does she mean to you?
Well, to be honest, she's like a mother to me. She come on the farm and she visit us and she take us out to buy like our grocery and so forth and winter gears. And she didn't charge us any money. So she shows love. She always be there for us. And remember, she has her family, and she still find time for us.
What does that mean to you? I mean, as someone that comes from a different country.
It's mean a lot. It's mean everything. So you know that love is everywhere. It's not only from in the country where you're from, it's everywhere.
Your story is largely positive, but of course, you've said that there's people that have had it worse. I mean, what does that worse look like?
As I said before, I'm blessed, and I was with the best people in Canada. Nurses, doctor, friends, everything. So I didn't lucky, I'm blessed. But the other guys, they didn't get that treatment.
So the numbers that we found was over a 10-year period, there were about 800 workers who were repatriated for this overtly medical reason. So that just gives us a preliminary sense of some of the workers who've been injured over the years, which is helpful, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
It's cold where I live.
His given name is Jaleel Stewart, but he was called Bushman on the farm because He looked like another fellow who used to work there called Bushman. That's all that it was.
Yeah, Bushman. Oh man, there's a chair just next to me here, and I can see him in it. When he was over, we celebrated his birthday, and he's such a big man and just gathers people around him, and he would just gather Leah and Sam in a big hug. They were, I don't know, 4 and 5 at the time. Even before he got injured, he was very quickly a part of the people we love.
Bless us together one more time again. Father Jesus, as we always said, good friend, better than pocket money, oh God.
The first time I went to his house, it was one of the poorest houses I've been to in Jamaica, but it was a house full of song. Bushman, Jaleel, he's part of our family.
It was his first year there. It's hard labor. It's a nursery, and so there's a lot of adjustment for him. But I also kind of picked up on what the other guys were saying about him. He always looked after the guys that were not doing so well. It being their first year there, some of the guys didn't know how to cook all that well. Everybody has to cook their own meals. He loved to cook.
Rastaman too.
Yes.
Yeah.
He eat meat, but the doctor take him off and meat, the doctor.
No meat. Yeah.
So he's always taking care of the guys that were just kind of struggling or homesick or hated their own cooking. So he was always looking out and kind of bringing other people into the fold. When we received the news and he was in an accident at work where a forklift had slipped and it totally crushed his left hand.
No, when it's closed like this, no matter what you do, it not open up till it feel like.
He was rushed into emergency surgery. Something that should have been a half hour turned into 3 hours. Like, as long as he was going to therapy, it helped somewhat with the pain, but he was able to regain some mobility in his fingers. But then in 2010, he received a letter from WSIB.
We received permission from Jaleel Stewart to examine his legal documents. In late October, we confirmed Jane's version of events.
There were jobs available as cashiers in Niagara, and because basically that's something that he could do with one hand, he would be required to take that work, and they were no longer required to, or he was no longer eligible for compensation. And so they cut him off all therapy and any compensation.
This can happen because of a process called deeming. Now, with deeming, injured workers can actually lose compensation when an alternative job, both location and pay-wise, is found. Now, critics say this should never be applied to migrant workers who come to Canada for a very specific job.
I thought there was a terrible mistake. It sounded too bizarre. You've still got one hand, you can work as a cashier at a gas bar in Niagara. You're not going to get a visa for that. So he faxed it to me, and I read it with my own eyes. It's like, this is really happening. Like, he is really being cut off. I was so upset, and I just said, you know, Jaleel, you might feel abandoned by Canada, but we're not going to let this happen. We're not going to abandon you.
I just want to give up. Walk to work and I can't work. I don't raise me. Now my mom is sick and I want to help her. You don't hear about something again. I don't feel like it.
The contrast of Bushman and his family from years before, and that slow deterioration into a hopelessness and a despair in his voice, that encompasses so much of what that journey has been. So for me to hear that, I just want to weep. I just want to weep for this man who was just trying so hard to support his family, to take that man who is such a, people are drawn to being a man who is still tall but so broken that he cannot see beyond his pain anymore, that he would want to kill himself. A man of strong faith who would come to that sense of brokenness. That is just a pounding and pounding and pounding down of a man. We continue to pray for him. We continue to try to be a listening ear.
For every guy that's injured, there's 100 more waiting to take his place, and that is absolutely true. But when it's your friend, when you know the integrity of this person, when you have relationship, it injures and diminishes you too.
Jody and Jane have sent thousands of dollars in pain medication to Jamaica. They also make frequent trips to the country to visit Jaleel and his family. This commitment has not gone unnoticed in their community.
And they would say, you know, your efforts, what difference is that going to make? You make a difference in one person's life, their life changes, and the ripples go out from there. And it's that effect. And all I can do, I can't change the big picture. I'm not a political animal, but what I can do is be present to what God places before me.
Do you think he's going to make it?
How can I know? I think so. I hope so. All I can say is I hope so.
I mean, I'm such a different person than I was 10 or 12 years ago. I've lived a lot over the last 12 years, but I've learned how unnecessary it is to have so much stuff, and how stuff can actually be a burden and a barrier to relationships. I've learned so much about contentment through journeying with people who work so hard, gain so little from it, and yet the first thing they say in conversation is, I thank God for today. I thank God I woke up this morning. Just this thankfulness permeating. I'm talking mostly with my friends who we share the same faith with, and to see how deep their faith is and how unshakable. And yeah, it's been a real, true inspiration to me, and I just really treasure that fellowship and that friendship.
Who would like some more chicken?
It's not just throwing money at something. The difference that we can have in each other's lives in whatever situation, the ripples go out.